It's a pleasure to be here today and to talk about a topic that is a really large challenge today, which is operationalization of AI. But before we talk about this, which is the statistic that I want us to focus on, which is about only 10% of organizations can reliably get their AI models into production, I think we need to talk about an elephant in the room, and Darcy started us down that path. Right? This is me using generative AI. I produced the elephant in the room, a beautiful tool. I think it took a minute. This elephant I like to call Cinco. Any ideas why I called the elephant Cinco? Yes. 5 legs, that's right. So generative AI produced 5-legged elephant for me on the first go, right? And it might be because I'm lucky, or it might be because generative AI doesn't understand what an elephant looks like. And I think this is part of the debate, right? When we've all used these technologies and we're amazed by its capabilities, and we're amazed because it tricks our perceptions of what it generates, whether it's talking to us, whether it's producing pictures for us. Its capabilities to relate to us, to communicate to us, are amazing. But we don't truly understand how these technologies generate their outcomes. And from that perspective, there's a huge amount of debate. And we see this debate both from banks that have outlawed its usage until they get their hands around the risks. We've seen others that are looking and exploring using this from an AI or a coding perspective. Some CIOs say that as much as 40% of the code could be auto-generated in the future. There was an event where AI researchers came together and they basically said, we should take a pause on anything more powerful than ChatGPT-4 because we don't understand the implications. Last I checked, there was 27,000 AI researchers that have signed that petition. And just this week, we've seen Senate hearing committee having conversations about putting additional regulation, including licensing or regulating these technologies or prohibiting the use. So there's a very, very active conversation here. At FICO, as you always, right, we have people looking at this. We have a research team of 15 people focused on what are the right sort of ways to leverage this technology in a responsible way. We'll continue to do that. But that's not what I want to focus on right now, right? And I don't want to focus on that right now because we still have other challenges. I want to share with you other statistics that we have. This is a survey that we did with Corinium. Corinium surveyed 100 North American financial services companies and asked different questions of them. Primarily, what did their journey look like on the responsible AI path? And these numbers are concerning. 43% struggle with AI governance to meet regulatory requirements, 50% lack a model development standard, 71% say that AI ethics and responsible AI are not part of their operations at all today. Right? And 27% haven't even defined what a model standard is. So any data scientist could be building models in different ways. They get to a governance team, they get rejected, they don't get deployed. And this is a big part of the operationalization issues that we have when we look to build AI and machine learning and bring them into our businesses today. If you're interested, you can scan in the QR code and get more about that report. But I want to talk about why this is so hard and what we need to do about it. But before I get there, let's look at the other way of looking at these statistics, right? If half don't have a model development standard, the other half do. And if 71% don't deal with AI ethics and responsible AI in their operations, well, that means that 29% do. And we heard from Stephanie, right, that drives a differentiation between the innovators and leaders and the laggers. And so I want to talk about why some of us are lagging in our ability, right, and what we can do to better operationalize these models going forward. Now, I'm not going to show you a ChatGPT-4 model with 1 trillion free parameters. I'll show you a relatively small neural network here. This is a neural network with like 25 free parameters, 6 inputs, 3 latent features. And as simple and as clean as this looks, it still doesn't stand up to regulatory scrutiny when you start to ask to explain an outcome, maybe to this couple who's hoping to buy a home, right? And this is part of the challenge, right? And Researchers have applied explainable AI on top, right? And explainable AI I like to talk about as the good, the bad, and the ugly, and it's mostly bad and ugly, because it doesn't necessarily get to the core reasons why this couple may or may not get the loan that they need, right, to drive the outcome they want for their lives. In addition to this, right, there's bias that can be imputed. All our data is biased, and when you apply a machine learning model on top, you may incorporate that bias into the model. And so you propagate the bias. And so that's also a major sort of concern around these sort of technologies. Now, the other thing I'll tell you is that this type of model has been around for a while. And many researchers want to drive larger models, bigger models, more data, cloud computing, open source, right? Cheaper, faster, better, bigger. But they haven't focused on new types of algorithms. Algorithms that actually put explainability and interpretability at the forefront, right? That make safety and fairness the primary importance and put things like prediction as a secondary objective. For that, we're moving to a different regime, a regime where we look at very different types of machine learning models. These machine learning models are called interpretable machine learning models. Many of you that follow me or have been talking to FICO have heard about interpretable machine learning models. What it allows us to do is open up the black box. So let me show you what that means. It means that we rethink what is the machine learning algorithm. And when I say rethink it, look fundamentally at the algorithms that we're using to train these models and apply additional constraints. The first constraint here is called an interpretability constraint. We like to call it the Highlander constraint after the famous 80s movie. We basically indicate that you can find a solution to this problem, but you can have no more than 2 connections to any latent feature. And if you impose that in the training, what you end up having is a neural network solution that looks like this. This neural network is more transparent, more interpretable. You can look at each of these latent features and understand if that fires and causes a positive or negative outcome for a consumer, what drove that decision, okay? You're not going to infer what that decision is. You can point directly to what caused that score to be high or that score to be low. Moreover, going beyond interpretability and explainability, by inspecting models in these ways, we have an opportunity to address imputed bias. We can study each of these latent features. We can look at how they fire differently for different classes of people. And if we find that there is a significant difference on 2 different classes of people, we can prohibit the use of those variables interacting in our models and remove it. We are engineering a solution based on what the model learns and how it learns over time. Palatability constraints, right? A very big concern with machine learning models. People that use machine learning models sometimes ignore this, right? And you get these weird results when someone, let's say, takes on more and more debt, they get a better risk score. These are also constraints you can put on the model development to ensure that as one variable increases in size, that the outcome of that model similarly increases in the direction it needs to. So that models are palatable in terms of the monotonicity and the expectations. And finally and importantly, we can start to put thresholds around ethical AI constraints. No one's telling us how to do this as an industry, right? We're giving recommendations that we should do this, and that's helpful, right? We think we all know we should do this. But this allows us to go look at latent features, understand at the time of the model that was developed, how do different classes of individuals fire on a particular latent feature, and apply thresholds that shouldn't be exceeded so that if they are in production, we can ensure that the model that we maybe built in development is also responsible in deployment. Now, I talked about the model governance block, model development governance documents and standards. This is very important. For many people, model development and machine learning is essentially an academic exercise, right? There's this conversation occurring all the time that we must treat model development with the same level of sophistication as we would software. And for us at FICO, we use a model development blockchain. This has two purposes. The first purpose is it codifies our model development process, our expectations in terms of how the model is built, which algorithms are allowed, which tests have to be done properly. And each and every step is put on the blockchain, so we have an immutable record of what was done, what decisions got made, so we can revisit it later if we ever need to. Or if we need to have the conversation with a regulator or a governance team to explain how that model is developed. Moreover, also on that blockchain at the time of model development is recording what we need to be watching in production. Too often, right, another scary statistic is most companies don't monitor their models sufficiently. And so at the time of model development, the model developer can specify what needs to be monitored such that we know whether the model is operating responsibly in production. And so that's called auditable AI, having the ability to have access to that information and then monitor it in production. This is how we develop models in a responsible AI fashion that meet the regulatory concerns and governance concerns. It's also providing us an ability to make sure that once it's in production, it continues to do so. And it enforces a standard of work and adherence to that standard of work. Now, that's just part of it, right? So we can build this, we understand how the model is developed, we understand what we have to monitor. The other major part and challenge of operationalizing AI is the fact that no model should be developed without understanding where it gets deployed. For us, we have the FICO platform. This is where we understand that models live. If you don't do that and you're building a model and throwing it over the fence to someone to implement, that's a challenge. It's a challenge, and it's one of the larger reasons why most models don't get it deployed and AI doesn't successfully deliver on its value. For us, responsible AI is at the center of our platform. And it requires that myself and Bill Wade are very well connected in terms of the capabilities of the platform and the requirements of the models. Within here, we talked about interpretable machine learning and also scorecards where we have these interpretable models that allow this level of focus on whether it was built properly and we have the proper level of interpretability. In addition to this, we have focused on the concept of standard models, models that are ready to go out of the box. So they work in the correct impedance match with the deployment environment and can be tweaked and tuned from that point forward. Or you can just have access to characteristics libraries on the platform and then build from there. The point is that they're developed in view of the software environment that they're going to be operating in and the components that they have access to. The next piece here is around transaction analytics, and we've seen so many great use cases at the conference this week of people using huge amounts of transaction information in ways that they never have before. Part of that is facilitated by the fact that you need to operationalize the way that transaction profiling is going to occur. You need the language. For us, that's called instant ML that allows you to address those profiling technology. And you need to make sure it's performant. The very last part of this, you cannot have these models deployed without having proper auditable AI mechanisms associated with it, and that's where it lives in our platform today. So we have access to that blockchain. We can operationalize the data in it so that we can monitor and ensure that in production these models are operated responsibly. So there are two major things we need to remember. One is that we need to have a model development standard for how we build models in a responsible way, and we need to have cognizance of and understanding of where it gets deployed and under what constraints do we have to build the models. Those two things have to be synergetic. They have to be together at all times. Now, part of our theme at the conference was around heroes, and I've seen plenty of Batman pictures and what have you, right, of people wanting to be heroes. This is one of my favorite quotes. This is a hero of mine. His name is George Box. He's a famous statistician. He doesn't look like a typical hero, right? All models are wrong, but some are useful. I think we need to think about that every day as we operationalize models and we understand how we want to deploy and use them in our decisions today. It's a very insightful thing, and it's one that allows us to understand that governance is more important than ever when it comes to how we develop models and then we productionalize and operationalize them in ways that will not harm the consumers while producing the value that we expect from these solutions. With that, I'd like to thank you and ask you, as you go out into the world and you look at your businesses, that you drive change in the world with AI responsibly. Thank you.